Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was half bijuu, part 1. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. The story of the Jubi and the Rikudo Sennin is a very old one. In fact, it is so old that many people consider it, and the Rikudo Sennin himself to be nothing but a myth. A childish illusion clouding the reality that was a ninja, woven by idealistic dreamers concerned only with finding a romantic fantasy in their miserable lives. Oh, those poor misguided fools. The so-called myth was as real as anything else. The story says that the legendary founder of ninjutsu defeated the powerful 10-tailed beast in battle. He then proceeded to seal the foul monster within himself to protect the world from its destructive rampage. And so, the world was saved from the exploits of the Jubi. This was the creation of the first Jinchuriki. But these times were not perfect, and Rikudo Sennin was just a man. He could not hold the Jubi forever. The Rikudo lived in constant fear that immediately after his death, the Jubi would be released to wreak havoc upon the world once again. So, nearing the end of his life, the sage used the legendary technique Izanagi to split the Jubi's chakra into 10 humongous sources of chakra that he spread across the world, before creating the moon, and sealing the Jubi's body within it. The split chakra eventually festered enough for it to take on a form, and eventually a body. And thus, the 9 great beings known as the bijuu came into existence. But only 9 beings. The Rikudo split the Jubi's chakra into 10 pieces. The 10th piece never became a bijuu. No one knows anything about this extra piece of chakra, much less what happened to make it fail to become a bijuu. Whatever the case, the chakra just never took on a form, and maybe for that we should be thankful. At the time of its creation, the 10th piece flew across the world, much like the other pieces of the Jubi, before it landed, and spread into a particularly dense part of the High no Kuni's forest. As it arrived in the nearby forest, all forms of life withered before it. Nothing but an expanse of death and decay was around the chakra for about a radius of 100 feet. At that point in time, it should have taken on a form, become a bijuu just like the rest of its kind, but it didn't. The chakra did not take on a form or consciousness, and it remained just that chakra. Pure energy, if you will. Energy that soaked into an unknown cave about 50 feet from its landing spot, never to be seen again by human eyes. This is the story of the 10th part of the Jubi. The story of the failed bijuu. Namikaze Minato had never been through such a turbulent night in his life. It had all started extremely well, with his wife giving birth to their second child, a girl they had named Haruki. After incurring some tremendous success with their first child, Minato and Kushina were confident they could have more kids, with Kyuubi remaining sealed within Kushina completely. And so it had. Kushina had undergone another successful pregnancy, with Kyuubi still remaining sealed within her, by using the exact same method when she had given birth to Naruto. That is, being placed in a secure location outside the village, and having a barrier erected around the area. When this was done, he would make sure to give Sarutobi Bawako an expensive gift for helping them with 2 births. And so, the Hokage felt his heart warm when he looked upon his daughter for the first time. God, she was beautiful. She had bright blonde hair, much like himself and Naruto, but it was straight like her mother, and of a slightly lighter tint. As she opened her eyes for the first time, he caught a glimpse of her face. It was very much like her mother's, with much more rounded facial features, and grey eyes. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" said Kushina, as the proud parents began to admire their newborn daughter. Minato half-heartedly put out one of his hands, stopping it 3 feet in front of Haruki's face. The baby stared in confusion up at her father, before she giggled, and reached out her arms at him, trying to touch his hand. A small tear ran down the man's face, and he reached out to gently touch his daughter's small hand. But, the happiness he felt from seeing his newborn daughter fell short. That is, when the creepy masked guy somehow got through the barrier, and grabbed his daughter, threatening to kill her, unless he stepped away from Kushina. That was when his day took a turn for the worse. And, a lot of things happened to make it that way. For starters, he was separated from Kushina via exploding tags, which allowed the masked man to capture Kushina, and use a Fuinjutsu to chain her to a bunch of rocks, so he could extract the Kyuubi. The thing that really killed his day was extracting the Kyuubi part. When Minato used his Hiraishin to get to the spot, he was immediately relieved to see Kushina still alive, and well. A penchant for her clan's legendary longevity. But, he felt a cold dreadness, as he glimpsed at the Kyuubi before teleporting away to the place where they had left Haruki. His heart nearly stopped when he teleported into the village to see the Kyuubi rampaging everywhere. What an awful scene. Buildings were in shambles, bodies torn to pieces were thrown all over the streets. He sealed himself at the sight of the Kyuubi goring another shinobi in the distance. He had stopped Kyuubi's attack from hitting him using a space-time technique, but he couldn't stop the masked man from slipping through his guard, and used another space-time technique to teleport both of them back to his clan compound. That was where he engaged with the man he learned of to be Hokage Madara. After a multitude of space-time techniques, by both parties, Minato finally managed to gain the upper hand, and strike the elder Hokage with a full-powered Rasengan. He went in for another attack, this time aiming to wrest the Kyuubi from Madara's control, when a childish voice made him halt. "Daddy?" Minato's eyes widened, and he turned away from his injured enemy to see his 2-year-old son standing on the front porch of their compound. He was shaking wildly, tears pouring from his eyes, as he saw his father engaged with an opponent. "Naruto," gasped Minato. What was going on? Didn't he leave an Anbu in charge of him while his sister was being born? "Daddy?" cried Naruto again, as his stubbly toddler legs began running towards his father. "Naruto, don't!" yelled Minato, holding his hand out trying to stop him. "Oh, your son, eh?" said Madara from the ground, relieved that he still had control over the fox. He weakly got to his feet, a large gaping hole in his cloak and undershirt where the Rasengan had hit earlier. "I've been too injured to continue this fight, so I think I'll let Kyuubi do the rest of the work." Without allowing Minato to even respond to that, he teleported away back to the main battle. Minato fell to his knees, panting. He would have to rejoin the battle, and somehow reseal the Kyuubi. He was just about to get to his feet when he felt a slight tug on the hem of his Hokage robe. His resolution fell when he looked into his son's confused, worried face. "Daddy, what's going on?" the toddler asked. Minato's gaze softened completely, before he placed a tender hand on his son's head. "Oh, nothing, Naruto. Daddy's just having a little problem, is all. But he'll fix it, just like he always does. Just go find mommy, and stay with her until I'm finished, okay?" Naruto grinned, an eerie likeness to Kushina's smile. "Okay?" he chirped happily, before he skipped off back into the house, almost tripping on his own 2 feet. Minato smiled softly, as he watched the little boy head back into the house. It was times like these he realized how lucky he actually was. As soon as the boy was out of sight, the Hokage glared, setting a look of determination on his face. And with that, he was gone. Minato thought the fight with Kyuubi and Madara would be the most difficult one he had ever had. That is, until Kushina showed up out of nowhere, and used her famous chakra chains to bind herself to the Kyuubi. And now awake Haruki was crying her eyes out, and a frightened Naruto appeared from behind his mother, clutching her kimono tightly. He was looking at his sister for the first time in his life, and wasn't sure if he should feel happiness at that, or fear of the whole dangerous situation. He had shot down the idea of Kushina resealing the Kyuubi into herself, and dying, and was now proclaiming that he would seal the Kyuubi into his newborn daughter, using Shiki Fusion instead. He now saw that Haruki was meant to be a Jinchuriki, the Jinchuriki to lead the ninja world to their bright future. Already he could hear his sensei's words echo in his head, a story of a divine, prophetic child that was to be their savior. As he looked at his daughter, and the situation around him, he knew it. She was the savior. And that meant that man up there was the harbinger of destruction also mentioned in the prophecy. When his sealing completed, Minato knew that the control he had over the Kyuubi would slip, and although it wouldn't be permanent, it would last long enough for his daughter to become an adult, and finally kill this man. That would be the proudest moment of his life. He ignored Kushina's protests to his plan, already going through the hand seals, and telling her to have faith in their daughter. At any other time, he would have been in stark protest to dying. But now, seeing his beautiful wife, his wonderful son, and his beautiful daughter, the chosen child, he felt that his sacrifice for them was a beautiful thing that he would not mind doing. He would make sure that they survived. Because, that is what a good father and husband did. "Shiki Fusion," he said loudly, as the disturbing and frightening god of death appeared behind him. He felt the cold, miserable arm of death enter his body, worming its way through his insides, and finding the darkest corners of despair in his mind. It was truly horrific, and to think that he would be feeling this all in due time. He heard Kushina yelling at him, as he picked up his daughter. Why? Why are you sacrificing Haruki to save the village and the country? Why are you sacrificing yourself for me? Minato closed his eyes. I can't just turn my back on my country. That's as bad as abandoning a child. You should know, when you saw your own country fall apart, and you were left without a home. And you know that we are a shinobi family of shinobi. And, it's not just for you. It's for Haruki, as well. I need you to be there to raise her, and Naruto, as well. There are things she needs to learn about being a Jinchuriki, things that only you can tell her. I wouldn't be a proper substitute. Minato turned his back on her, facing Kyuubi, and the Hokage on top of its head, dying to make a better life for his children. That's the stuff you should let the father handle. Kushina's eyes widened. Minato had already begun. They had set up a barrier around the forest that he had teleported the Kyuubi to, in order to prevent the Kyuubi and Madara from escaping. He rushed forward, the Shinigami's arm extending to meet with the Kyuubi. Curse you, Yondaime Hokage said Kyuubi and Madara simultaneously, as the hand entered the fox's body. Kyuubi and Minato engaged in an intense battle of wills, the fox's heavy chakra threatening to overwhelm the Hokage. The Hokage had abandoned the idea of sealing just half of the Kyuubi inside Haruki, and now concentrated his full effort on sealing the whole thing. A resounding ripping sound was heard throughout the battlefield, as a hazy, bluish silhouette of the fox came into view. And now for the sealing. Minato yelled, as he summoned forth the ceremonial sealing platform. Minato manipulated the soul of the Kyuubi, so that it was facing the baby on the platform. Kyuubi raised his paw, preparing to go in for a deadly strike towards the child. Too late. Kyuubi's soul became severed from his body, as Minato completed pulling it out. In a split second, the now useless body of the Kyuubi fell to the ground, turning a sickly shade of purple. Madara jumped to safety on a nearby tree, after the collapse of the great titan beast, clutching his Rasengan injury. Kushina and Naruto watched, as Minato pushed the essence of the Kyuubi into their newest family member. The soul rippled out in all directions, and Haruki began screaming during the entire ordeal. As the sealing completed, Haruki stood stock still, almost as if she were dead. Her parents felt an overcoming sense of dream enter the fiber of their being, until finally the baby began to stir again. A familiar spiral seal appeared on the girl's navel, but there were absolutely no whisker marks or anything else to remind them of what had happened this evening. Minato smiled down at his daughter. The seal worked. She was alive, and her mother and brother were still alive. Everything was perfect except for... Minato's eyes snapped open. He had forgotten about Madara. And it looked like the Shinigami wasn't going to wait any longer to collect his soul. The god of death floated over, closing the distance between itself and immortal. Minato stood speechless. In front of a true god, his power meant nothing. There was no chance he would be able to stop Madara now. He waited for the contractions in his body, and for the Shinigami to tear out his soul. He knelt down, praying to Kami-sama to give him more time. More time for him to stop Madara. And then, nothing happened. The Shinigami's arm was being removed from his body, and it wasn't leaving with his soul. What had happened? Has his prayer been answered? He looked up to see the god looking at him in pure distaste. You are not what I am in the mood for. Its deep booming voice echoed throughout the perimeter, even though only Minato was able to hear it. What? He said. He turned his head to see the Shinigami float right past him, completely ignoring his speech. Kushina was giving him a strange look, and a look of impregnable hope that Minato wouldn't be taken spread upon her face. Madara hopped onto the ground, looking livid at this new prospect. His beautiful beast had been taken from right under his nose. This wouldn't do. This wouldn't do at all. He would kill every member of the Namikaze family to make sure they never interfered with his plans in the future. It was a perfect opportunity in their weakened state as well. He began walking, before he felt a strange sensation enter his being. It was a hopeless cold, one without any trace of warmth, love or hope. As the feeling penetrated the Hokage's body, he arrived at the pure agony that accompanied it. He clutched his head, and then he saw the most terrifying thing that he had ever seen in his long life. It was completely ethereal, with a disgusting purple skin, and long, spiky white hair. It wore robes of pure white, an array of beads wrapping around its arms and neck. Two dark black horns stuck out of its long mane of hair. The creature was sticking its strange tattooed arm into Madara's body. The Hokage was so paralyzed with shock that he couldn't even cry out. He gave a spasm, as the creature took a hold of his soul, and ripped it out so easily that it may have been just a flimsy piece of paper. Its deed done, the Shinigami released Madara, and allowed him to flop onto the ground. It raised Madara's soul to its mouth, devouring the essence in an instant. The last thing that Madara saw when he was alive was the creature devouring his soul. And then death marked the end of the madness of the man. Minato stared in silent shock, as the Shinigami ripped out Madara's soul so easily. But, why Madara? Why not him, the one who had made a contract with the god in the first place? Why? Was all Minato could get out, as the god hovered over to him again. The Shinigami stared straight ahead, its eyes focused on no particular thing. I am the god. I get to choose whose soul is devoured in the process. The contract is just a formality, and it actually means nothing. I was simply not in the mood to eat your kind soul today, said the Shinigami with such finality that you couldn't deny its claim to be true. But you should count yourself lucky, mortal. You are one of the few who escaped my hold. And now, you get to live another day, and move on to the afterlife in peace. With your family, the god said calmly, as it disappeared from Minato's view. Minato sat there dumbly, his mouth slightly agape. He had just escaped death. He got to live with his family. Images of his ideal future popped into his head, and the man slowly smiling, tears of joy falling from his face. He picked up his sleeping daughter from off the platform, before making his way over to Naruto and Kushina. Kushina seemed to have an expression of joyous disbelief, and his 2-year-old son was crying. Minato daddy. They had said simultaneously, as they both tightly hugged their husband-father, bawling their eyes out. Minato hugged them both back, the newest member of their family being at the center of the circle. Minato, please tell me this isn't a dream. That Kushina broke off, before she cried even harder in her husband's chest. Minato kissed his wife. Yes, Kushina. This isn't a dream. I'm alive, and I will not leave you. Our family will continue to live on, he said, as Minato himself began to cry. All three of them then turned to the sleeping infant in her father's arms. And, we have our greatest savior right here with us. She will be sure to lead to a new golden age of peace and prosperity. Minato and Kushina both smiled warmly at their newborn daughter, while Naruto adopted a look of wonder, as he reached out to touch his new sister, almost wondering if she were real or not. There was one thing that bothered Minato though, and it pertained back to his sensei's speech. Haruki was surely the child of the prophecy, he knew that much. But Madara was dead. He couldn't have been the harbinger of destruction. Minato turned to look at the moon, a faraway look entering his blue eyes. It was the harbinger of destruction, then. 3 weeks later, Namikaze Minato was a man who was both practical and idealistic. Any normal man would have a hard time blending both of these aspects, but Minato is no normal man. Where others failed, he shined. He maintained the perfect degree of practicality and idealism in his daily life, never straying from that path while laughing in the faces of those who doubted him. His idealism shone in times of peace, with his inherent belief that people were good at heart. He was a firm supporter of hard work and the will of fire that his 3 predecessors had righteously followed. His ideals and beliefs would surely continue to shape Konoha for many years in the future. He also believed in his sensei's visions. True peace could be found in the ninja system. Former enemies who would have killed each other in a heartbeat could come together and live in this new era. But this is not to say that he is impractical. In times of war, there is no room for idealism, and Minato knew this well. The blonde-haired man followed every mission the elders had given him to a T, with maximum efficiency every time. He was an integral part of the war with Iwa, often being called to the front lines to deal with hordes of oncoming Iwa nin. His kill count in the war was even greater than his wife's, though her kills were significantly flashier and bloodier. But thankfully, they weren't at war anymore, despite the heavy attack incurred by Hokage Madara and the Kyuubi 3 weeks ago. Thanks to his efforts, Madara's plan was triumphantly thwarted, and the village avoided destruction. And they had gained another gift. A hero. The little blonde-haired baby who was sleeping on his desk at this very moment. His daughter Namikaze Haruki. The one he had sealed the rampaging Kyuubi into. The man couldn't help but admire her. She was the center of their family, their shinobi family of shinobi, and of the entire village. He had announced his deed in front of the entire village, and to his great joy and relief, they had embraced her with open arms. Sounds and chants of both his and her heroism thundered throughout the village. Parties were thrown, and honors were given to a brave man and his daughter. Naruto had paid a little too much attention to his newborn sister. His curiosity never ceased, and his father could never tell what was so interesting about Haruki. Well, he could tell, but there's no way a 2-year-old would ever comprehend it. Whatever the case, Naruto wouldn't stop poking the baby, his small face becoming alight with childish glee every time Haruki would react to it. And when Naruto did start poking her, that is when she would never stop crying. He didn't know what was happening with Naruto. His son has been a complete enigma ever since the attack. He was quieter and more reserved. He wasn't the bright, young ball of energy that he was before the attack. The boy had been completely shell-shocked for about a week after. Could he have been traumatized by the experience? It was understandable. Being exposed to ninja combat at such an early age could traumatize the child dramatically. But Minato was sure the boy would come around eventually. After all, they were a family of ninja. He hoped the boy would come around. His actions were starting to get annoying. Which is exactly why he had brought Haruki into the office with him this morning. To give her a break from Naruto's bothersome actions. Plus, couldn't a man spend some quality time with his newborn daughter? Jiraiya was supposed to meet him in his office today, to discuss the attack and the mechanics of the seal he had placed on his daughter. But the pervert was already a half-hour late, and Minato had a pretty good idea on what he was doing. The Hokage thought of what his teacher would say. He'd probably be happy that the harbinger of destruction was out of the way, and that the child of prophecy could lead the ninja world to a path of peace without any struggle. The office was silent, but, as Minato sighed, more noise could be heard. A tap and a drumbeat. They seemed to come from someplace unknown. Another one. The rhythm became louder and more intense. A puff of smoke appeared in the middle of the room, and Minato pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. A nauseating smell of what seemed to be a mixture of body odor and perfume came with the smoke. The silhouette of a large man doing a ridiculous dance while singing some high-pitching lyrics was what graced Minato's eyes. Haruki fluttered, opened her eyes, and began to cry loudly, her screams increasing as she viewed the man in the middle. Minato closed his eyes for a moment, drowning out the obnoxious noise of both his daughter and his sensei. When he opened them, he was greeted to the sight of the white-haired man grinning down flashily at him. What do you think of my new intro? Even better than my last one, right? Minato sighed heartily, before reaching down to coddle his daughter. The little girl continued to cry for a few seconds, before it finally died down to some near-silent sniffles and hiccuping. Jiraiya noticed the little baby, before he grinned even wider. So there's the little brat, eh? I'm surprised you even brought her into the office with you. Minato smiled slightly, as the baby stopped sniffling, and began laughing. Well, Naruto wouldn't stop poking her. I had to give her a break from that. Not to mention, she has to meet her new godfather. Minato lifted Haruki's pink flannel shirt to expose her slightly chubby stomach. On the baby's stomach was an intricate black seal, in a spiral pattern surrounded by several strange black markings. Is it the seal? Jiraiya asked, scrutinizing the markings closely, his eyes scanning the seal for any sort of mistake that could have been made. Well, I'll be. You really did seal the fox into her using the Shiki fusion. Coupled with the Uzumaki clan's special seals to form the Haki no Fun Shiki, it will give her the ability to access the beast's chakra in the future. That will surely help me grow up to be a fine Kinoichi. But what really amazes me is the fact that you survived using the Shiki fusion. By all means, you should be dead right now, Minato. Even such a morbid question couldn't dampen Minato's good spirits, though he remembered how lucky he had been to survive on the fateful night. Feeling the cold arm of death itself reach inside your bowels and hold your very soul in a vice grip was the worst feeling in the world. It was the feeling of hopelessness, of despair. The amount of shameful relief he had felt when the Shinigami began targeting Madara instead of him was staggering. The Hokage forced a smile. I know that I should be dead after using it. That guarantees nothing but death to all of its users. But I'm not dead. The Shinigami chose to let me live, taking Madara's soul instead of mine. Jireya's eyes whitened substantially. I didn't realize that such a thing could happen. So, Hokage Madara is forever out of the picture, is that right? Minato grabbed a document from his stack of paperwork, making a face at it before placing it to his right. Yes, the seal of the death god is absolute. Not even that man could escape it. His hold on the Kyuubi has been permanently broken, as well. The fox is now safely sealed within one of Konoha's ninja again. Minato stood up in his chair and looked Jiraiya straight in the eyes. A few months ago, you told me that the masked man, who I later found to be Hokage Madara, was the harbinger of destruction in the prophecy told by the great toad sage of Mount Maiboku. Haruki is the child of prophecy, the one destined to bring peace to the elemental countries. And if Madara, the harbinger of destruction, is dead, that means that there is no one to oppose the child of prophecy anymore, right? His voice was nervously pleading, desperate for the proper answer that should be coming from Jiraiya's mouth. Jiraiya looked at his feet. His student really seemed to have faith in his daughter's abilities. It would be hard to break it to him. The tall man bit his lip, trying to find the words to say to his protege. He suddenly felt sick to his stomach. Minato sealed the Kyuubi into his daughter based on his statements. Granted, the village had taken kindly to it, but it was still quite a burden to carry. Minato the great toad sage's prophecy isn't exactly clear-cut. I was simply making a guess as to who the child of prophecy and harbinger of destruction were. Based on his deeds, the harbinger of destruction was most likely Hokage Madara. But I can't be sure. It's a different story with the child of prophecy. All the toad sage said about that was that it would be a student of mine. Jiraiya winced when Minato adopted a frown on his face. The man looked lamely down at his daughter, who was giggling happily up at him. Then he started, but never finished his sentence. Jiraiya felt even guiltier. And, it's a strong possibility that your daughter isn't the child of prophecy after all. You are obviously going to ask me to teach her, which I will agree to because of my idiotic last hope that she is the child of prophecy. But the main reason your daughter isn't likely to be the child of prophecy is because she is a Jinchuriki, he explained. Minato glared at his sensei, anger becoming present in his eyes. That's it. That's the reason you believe she won't be able to save this world. Simply because she holds a demon inside of her. Part of my reasoning for sealing the Kyuubi away from her was in the hopes that she'll be able to use its power to protect the ninja world. And now you're telling me she won't be able to do that because of the demon she's supposed to use to protect anyway. Do you think she's a demon too? Yelled the Hokage. Jiraiya said nothing, his face never giving away any noticeable reaction. He was already prepared for that kind of anger from Minato. Minato sat back in his chair, out of breath from his rant. Haruki began crying, her happy mood killed by her father's anger. Sennin held up his hand, trying to calm Minato. I do not believe Haruki is a demon, nor do I believe that it is her fault that she will not be the child of prophecy. Rather, I believe it is the ninja's world fault that she can't save them. The bijuu are weapons used by the hidden villages. And the Jinchuriki are the ones who utilize those weapons. As much as I hate to say it, no matter how many people accept her, no matter how the village treats her, that fact won't change. Your daughter wields some incredible power, Minato. Power that you yourself want her to use. As long as she becomes a ninja, she will have to use the Kyuubi's power for some unsavory tasks. Jiraiya paused in his speech, to see Minato beginning to breathe heavier. If a war breaks out, the council will put her at the front. As the most important weapon they have. And even you won't be able to override that. And even if war doesn't break out, she will still be involved in high-level missions. In the end, she will be involved in too many deadly and destructive tasks for me to consider her the one who will be the savior of the world, no matter how much I want her to be. Minato shook his head. It's not true. I won't let he was cut off. You won't let them. That isn't true. You are just one man, Minato, and the council has the power to override you in times of crisis. Said Jiraiya, a little firmer than before. It's not true. It's not. She's the center of our family. She has to be the child of prophecy. If she isn't, why did I seal the Kyuubi in her in the first place? She's not just some weapon, she's my daughter. I wouldn't let them use her as a weapon for their own benefit. As soon as he stopped, Jiraiya grabbed Minato by the shoulders and slammed him against the wall forcefully. Listen to me, Minato. You're the Hokage. You can't just sit here with your finger up your ass and delude yourself that your daughter is the child of prophecy, because chances are she will not be. The best thing to do is help your daughter become a real ninja, instead of the child of prophecy. The council will want to use her eventually, that fact is absolute. But, what better way to help her have a happy life than to let your daughter take after you, rather than forcing this child of prophecy bullshit on her? Jiraiya said, inches away from Minato's face. Minato pushed his sensei away lightly. No, I'll protect her from the council. If she can be the child of prophecy, she'll become Hokage at the very least. I will personally see to that. If I name her my successor, the council will be unable to interfere any longer. Then, we'll truly see if she is the child of prophecy or not. Jiraiya banged his fists on the desk. God damn it, Minato. What will it take for you to listen to me? Becoming Hokage is fair enough, but you can't proclaim her the child of prophecy when she clearly isn't. What will you do if she fails? Minato sat back in desk, a smug look upon his face. This conversation is over. I will not turn her over to the council. She will be her own ninja, and she will not be trained by you. She will be trained by me and Kushina. Jiraiya frowned, still looking unsatisfied by this answer. He stoutly turned around and opened the door to the office. I hope you know what you're doing, Minato. Minato watched the white-haired man shut the door quietly behind him before he turned to look down at his daughter, who was still sniffling from the conflict that transpired in the room. Minato forced a grin on his face at the sight of his daughter, gently stroking her cheek to soothe her. You are going to be the best shinobi I have ever seen before. I promise. Kushina sighed as she tried to get her son to move. Ever since the attack, he hadn't been doing much of anything except poking his sister. He was quieter too, and the loud, vibrant toddler from before seemed like almost a mystery. There was no doubt that he had been traumatized by the events that had taken place not too long ago. She could understand, viewing lethal combat at the mere age of 2 could be traumatic. She was worried about him, that was for sure. There were shinobi family of shinobi, which meant that Naruto would definitely become one in the future, but she didn't know how he would. The boy was absolutely tiny for his age, and if he remained traumatized by combat, he would never become a successful ninja. His chakra reserves were abysmal, and despite not knowing how much control he had over them, she knew very well that it would make no difference. She thought back to her daughter. The baby had enormous chakra reserves for a newborn, courtesy of the Kyuubi. Coupled with her former bijuu sealed inside, Haruki was perfect for being a ninja. But did that mean that they could ignore Naruto in favor of Haruki? She hoped not. They would at least try to give him the same training that they would give Haruki, but if he didn't progress at all, then she didn't know what they would do then. 4 years later, 6-year-old Naruto was not afraid. He was not afraid. He was not. Okay, maybe he was a little afraid. Afraid to be entering the institution that would turn him into a ninja. His father was a ninja, the Hokage in fact. His mother was a ninja as well, and second only to his father himself. Even his 4-year-old sister was being trained as a ninja. So wouldn't it be rather obvious that he would become a ninja as well? He stared up at the building. This school where future shinobi meant to serve Konoha are trained. His parents had decided to enroll him in the academy a year early, and Naruto had been dreading this day for months. His mother basically had to drag him out of bed so she could accompany him on his first day of school. The boy bit his lip before latching himself around his mother's midsection. Kushina grinned as she felt her son wrap his arms around her stomach and grip her flak jacket tightly. He buried his head into the coarse material, refusing to look at the building again. Kushina pried his small arms off of her, bending down to grasp her son's shoulders. Now, Naruto, it's not as bad as it looks. The Ninja Academy can be a fun place, and the academy instructors will be sure to help you if you are having difficulties. His mother comforted him. For some reason, it didn't ease Naruto's anxiety in the slightest. He didn't care about that. He was more concerned that he was going to become a ninja. In a few years, having experiences like that 4 years ago would become an everyday occurrence for him. He shook himself free of those thoughts. He didn't want to think about that. Do you have to go, Kasan? Naruto asked. Kushina smiled slightly at him. You'll be fine, Naruto. Just hold your head up high, and don't let anyone push you around. Inwardly, the woman was slightly worried for her son. He showed a lack of zeal for being a ninja. He was still the same timid boy from 4 years, proving that he never truly got over his early experience. She would have to see how he adjusted to the academy. Bending down, Kushina kissed her son on the cheek before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto stared blankly at the spot where his mother once was, before nervously turning around to face the building yet again. He looked down at his schedule to see he had room 2A, with some teacher named Yumino Ruka. Around him, he vaguely noticed the other kids saying goodbye to their parents, and started eagerly shuffling into the building. He heard the bell ring suddenly, as he entered the academy, the blaring noise startling him. No. He couldn't be late on his first day. The boy began to run through the halls, his small legs not letting him go very fast. His classroom was at the very edge of the academy, so it was a good 3 minutes before he finally reached the door. He could hear his teacher talking through the door, something about how they were going to proudly represent Konoha, and that they should study their hardest. He didn't really pay that much attention. He turned the doorknob slightly, and all eyes turned on him as he entered the room cautiously. The teacher looked at him expressionlessly, but he could practically feel the taunts and jeers of his classmates, even if they didn't say anything. He knew why. He was a year younger, and he was small and skinny, standing at only 3 feet tall. Not to mention he was the Hokage's son. All around the village, he knew the people criticize him. They said he was much too short and scrawny to be the Hokage's son. They took much kinder to his sister, who was healthy and tall for her age. She also didn't reject his parents' training. He just didn't get it. Why would anyone want special treatment? It just makes the merit worth less in the end. Iruka tried to smile. You must be Naruto. Your father has told me all about you, the scarred Chunin laughed nervously. But you're 3 minutes late, and you've missed my introduction. Please, take a seat. Iruka gestured to the rows of much bigger students. As he walked down the rows, he heard one boy say, "Look at that little weakling. He'll never make it as a ninja." I can't believe he was allowed to join the academy. Naruto almost glared at him until he heard the boy's friend say, "Just leave it. His father's the Hokage." Really, then no wonder he was allowed in here. Naruto took an aisle seat in the 4th row before laying his head down on his desk. I am not going to like it here. Minato expects several things to happen in his office throughout the course of the day. Things like paperwork, anbu, and the occasional daimyo were all things he had gotten used to. His wife even popped up frequently to bring him lunch or keep him company. But this was the first time she had ever run into his office sweaty and out of breath. Her hair was all tangled and a mess, her flak jacket was undone, yet she seemed strangely happy at this prospect. Minato put down his cup of tea and turned to address his wife. "Kushina, what's wrong?" he asked. Kushina said nothing and simply walked over to his desk, throwing paperwork off so she could see her husband in full view. "Kushina?" Minato asked when her face was mere inches from his own. Minato started, looking at the questioning expression on her husband's face. The big cheesy Uzumaki grin settled onto her face. "I'm pregnant." As soon as Naruto took that seat in the 4th row, he was immediately wishing that the clock would tick faster. Yet, much to his chagrin, the clock only seemed to move slower than ever before. It was tantamount to how much he would hate it here. Iruka wasn't done talking just yet, and now he was going over the many rules and regulations of Ninja Academy. Naruto absent-mindedly noticed this, but the boy was able to shrug these off quite nicely, as if he wasn't one to be affected by such things. He didn't think he'd be getting into very much trouble at this place, anyway. Naruto lazily grabbed a stack of papers when the girl directly in front of him gestured for him to take them, and passed them back after taking one, and realizing that it was a syllabus. He gave the piece of paper once over, taking his time, and struggling greatly with many words that were too big for him. As he finished reading the syllabus, the one thing that really stood out and bothered him about the information was the pure leniency they had against fights. It said that fighting would not be condoned, but it didn't mention any punishment that would be associated with it. It didn't state anything like this in words, but Naruto's mind was basically working out this. You're going to be a ninja, so you'll have to get used to combat. Which was partially true, by the way, though the Ninja Academy shouldn't be condoning the use of fighting against those who will be your comrades. The Ninja Academy was already proving to be a rat hole, with boys that seemed to harass them every chance they got, and the lenient punishment system. Iruka was talking again, going over something about their lesson plan for the day. They would begin with the history of Konoha, along with some basic weapon identification, and then they would break for lunch afterwards. He slumped his head down on the desk, but couldn't do that for longer than 5 minutes without Iruka yelling, and throwing chalk that hit him painfully in the head. Naruto would then sit back up, and much to his embarrassment, would show off his small, slightly pudgy body, and a confused look on his face. The other kids in the room would laugh uproariously at his stupidity, the boys from before having extra mocking jeers on their faces. Iruka would shriek at him to sit up straight and listen, but Naruto couldn't sit up fully straight without having his feet dangle in midair, which made for a very uncomfortable positioning during the long lectures. He ignored pretty much everything that Iruka said, avoiding punishment by sitting up, and making it seem like he was actually paying attention. But that didn't stop it from being bad. He felt the stares of those boys for every second he was in the classroom, their fierce eyes burning into his skin deeper and deeper. After what seemed like eons, the clock finally reached the allotted time, and the bell rang to confirm the class's lunchtime. But Naruto wasn't so sure he was looking forward to it. It meant that he would have to spend time with his peers, which was a thought that troubled him greatly. Before that, the authority of the sensei and the classroom had held them back, but now they had no such restrictions. The other students seemed to fly from their desks, eager to eat their food and talk to their friends. But not Naruto. The small boy waited for all the other kids to file out of the class, and it wasn't until Iruka-sensei was sitting at his desk grading papers that Naruto swung his stubbly legs out of the desk and began walking awkwardly towards the door. Iruka, who had previously been so immersed in his paperwork, finally looked up when he heard the door open for one last time. The very young Chunin put down his papers and smiled brightly at the young Namikaze. Naruto, on the other hand, wished he would have melted away on the spot. Oh, Naruto, I almost didn't see you leave. Your father personally dropped by the academy earlier to drop off your paperwork. Great man, he is. The finest Hokage we've ever had, I believe. I'm sure you're excited to follow in your father's footsteps, aren't you? Though, you'll never make it unless you pay attention in class. Naruto laughed heartily, never giving off the impression that he too had trouble in the academy. Naruto lifted his head, but didn't turn around to face his teacher. A slight tinge of red entered the boy's cheeks. He wanted to correct his teacher's mistake, but for some reason, he couldn't. Yes, muttered the boy with an air of finality, as he wandered out of the door. At lunch, Naruto watched, as the other kids sat, and played amongst themselves, trading foods, and laughing on the playground. He, on the other hand, sat on a small bench to the right of the main area, quietly eating his lunch. Due to the rest of his family being ramen fanatics, it was hard to find anything that wasn't the stuff. But he had managed to scrounge up a simple ham sandwich, and an apple for his first day at the academy. He wouldn't be caught dead carrying the abomination that was ramen, as Naruto vehemently loathed that tainted substance. The taste, the texture, the smell, they all drove him crazy. He wanted to puke at the mere sight of the poison, but due to the fact that he was around it so much, he guessed he had built up a sort of immunity to it. A small smile came onto his face, as he remembered that Haruki had cried for an hour when she had spilled her ramen one day, but the memory was cut off, as he saw a large, to him, shadow fully enter his vision. Naruto looked up, a voice in his mind telling him that this wasn't going to end well. Standing directly in front of him were three boys, the same ones that whispered those insults at him during class. Naruto folded back into the bench, trying to appear as small as possible under the sneers of the much larger boys. The boy in the middle, who seemed to be their leader despite being the smallest, had a few choice words to say about the young Namikaze. Hey, you're the Namikaze kid, Hokage-sama's son, aren't you? Being from that family, I wondered what kind of super child prodigy would be joining the academy, but it turns out you're just some scrawny little kid unworthy to be a ninja. The bully raised his fist, and brought it straight down onto Naruto's cheek. The 6-year-old gasped in pain, before being hurled from the bench to on the grass. His food was ripped from his hands, and made a nice decoration all over his clothes. He reached up to his face, feeling the scuff mark that the bully's fist had created. Naruto didn't have time to take any sort of counteraction, and he was immediately afterwards lifted from the ground by his collar, locking eye contact with the bully, and dangling almost a foot off the ground. The bully continued. My dad spent his entire life working hard to become a great ninja, and you couldn't imagine how proud he was to learn that I was capable of becoming a ninja. It's a lot different from you, who's only here in the first place because you're Hokage-sama's kid. A spoiled brat who doesn't deserve the Namikaze name. The bully roared. Naruto turned his head, trying to hide the fear in his eyes, as the other two kids began cracking their knuckles threateningly. The leader bully dropped Naruto onto the ground roughly, and began to imitate his lackeys. They hovered over Naruto like menacing giants, with an evil glint in their eyes, and their fists outstretched. Naruto attempted to shield his face with his arms, but it did next to nothing against the fierce onslaught that was to come. Just stay calm. Nothing happened to me during school today, Naruto muttered to himself. The boy managed to avoid a severe beatdown, but couldn't avoid numerous bruises, as well as a few cuts on the face, and a swollen lip. He was currently standing outside his house, the Namikaze compound, considering his father refused to live in the Hokage mansion. Regardless, the building was still one of the biggest buildings in the village, dwarfed only by the Hokage mansion and the Hyuga compound. Naruto especially thought it was a bit overkill, since only 4 people, not including their Anbu guards, lived in the estate. Speaking of which, there were 2 of them right now outside the entrance, their masks not giving away their true feelings. He didn't know if they had noticed him yet, but if they did, they didn't seem to mind that he was doing nothing more than lingering outside the entrance to his house. The 6-year-old straightened his posture, so it didn't look like he was hunched over in pain. He smiled a wide grin, one that looked so out of place, yet it hid his injured lip from view. He walked through the strong wrought iron gate to the main complex. As he approached, the Anbu guards that were stationed there bowed to him. Naruto highly doubted they actually held that level of respect for him. He entered the doorway, and the first thing that struck him was the lack of noise. Usually, this was a bustling home, with sounds and voices all mixed together. Sure, his father would surely still be at his office doing the always dreaded paperwork, but his mother should have at least been home. The small boy entered the main living room, and noticed the extra Anbu guards all over the grounds outside of the house. But his mother, and the usual servants were nowhere to be seen. He supposed the servants had retreated to their section of the compound for now, but where was his mother? He stared off into space, not knowing what to think, that he didn't even notice a strange-shaped object heading straight towards him. The thing smacked him on the face, eliciting a high-pitched grunting noise from Naruto's mouth. The object fell towards the ground immediately, and Naruto reached down to pick it up. It was a large teddy bear, worn a little with age, but not old enough to be considered an antique. I gotcha, Ani-chan. Naruto recognized the voice immediately, placing down the teddy bear to look at his sister. Namikaze Haruki was a sprightly young girl, always happy, and eager to do her best in the world of ninja that their parents were exposing her to. Her blonde hair was out of its usual ponytail, hanging loose past her shoulders. She wore a loose-fitting white shirt and a small blouse, similar to her mother's clothes when she was younger. This was proof that she would be training today, as on days off she usually wore dresses. Whereas Naruto was small and scrawny, Haruki had a more healthy body and complexion. Her skin was a healthy tan, and despite being barefoot, she already stood just as tall as Naruto. Naruto grinned weakly. That would explain the extra Anbu guards stationed all over the place. Haruki's grin turned into a frown as she saw her brother's forced smile. "Are you okay, Ani-chan?" she asked. Naruto's grin flattened slightly as he saw the worried look on Haruki's face. She knew something was wrong with him, and he didn't want to come off as even weaker. "I'm fine, Haruki-chan," the boy stuttered, pleading to whatever gods there were that his spacey sister would believe it. The girl put her hand on her chin, making a loud humming noise, while appearing to be deep in thought. After a few seconds, his contagious smile was back on her face. "Okay," she chirped, before the little girl bounded off towards the center of the living room to play with her toys. Naruto sighed in relief. It was already humiliating enough that his younger sister was already the same size as he was, but he didn't need to give off the impression that he was weaker than her too. The quiet boy went into their large kitchen and shut the door behind himself, blocking both the sight and sounds of Haruki. He took a seat at the counter and laid down his head on the cold marble table. He bit his lip. What was he doing? A thick bubble of shame arose within his stomach. Shame for his fear for the ninja world when his sister stood against the deadly occupation, eager to train and learn. Shame for his body, which was so small and weak it didn't even belong on a 4-year-old. He didn't deserve to be born into this family, and that realization all came crashing down on him at once. If he couldn't even handle the ninja academy, he had no right to even become a ninja. He didn't have the will. The boy didn't even flinch for over an hour. He had decided he would do nothing more than quietly wait for one of his parents to get home. The boy finally lifted his head up as he heard the slamming of the front door, followed by loud and hearty laughter by 2 individuals. He also heard Haruki shriek in joy, knocking something over before thundering over to where the laughter was. He meekly opened the kitchen door and stepped out into the open, where he was greeted by the sight of his parents. His father, still wearing his patented Hokage robe, was holding up his mother bridal style, with both of them having huge grins on their faces. Their grins widened when Haruki ran up to hug Minato round the stomach, and widened even further when Naruto stepped out of the kitchen. The husband and wife pair kissed each other, before Minato finally let Kushina down onto the floor. Haruki was confused at this odd behavior, after showing her distaste for the kiss, of course. Usually, her mommy and daddy would come home separately, or if they did come home together, her daddy wouldn't be carrying her mommy. Kushina walked over to the main part of the living room, decided to rest her tired body on one of the couches. Minato smiled softly, beckoning for both Naruto and Haruki to come sit with them. Haruki rushed over to sit on the couch, leaning against her mother, as she sat. Minato kept the grin on his face, watching, as his wife stroked her long blonde hair. Haruki closed her eyes, her breathing slowing to a rhythmic beat. He then looked over at his son, who had slowly walked right past him to sit adjacent to Kushina. Minato looked at the rest of his family and closed his eyes softly, making his way over to where the rest of his family was sitting. He stopped at the foot of the couch and then wrapped his arm around Kushina. "Naruto, Haruki, your mother and I have a very important announcement to make," he muttered slowly, and Kushina smiled at him as he did. She lifted her hands off of the now paying attention Haruki and placed them on top of Minato's hands. "Yes," she said softly. "It turns out that we're going to have another baby. You two are going to have a little brother or sister." Dead silence rang throughout the room, and both Naruto and Haruki looked gobsmacked at the revelation. Naruto slid down the couch, breathing heavily, and his eyes wide in shock. Haruki retained that dumbfounded look on her face, before a wide grin split onto her face, and she squealed to the heavens in glee. She crawled onto her mother's lap before the woman could even react, getting right in her face with numerous questions. Mommy, is it true? I'm gonna have a little brother or sister. When are they coming? Is it in your tummy right now? Can I feel it?" she asked rapidly, next to no pause appearing in her massive amount of questions. Kushina laughed. "Yes, dear, he's in my tummy right now, and he should appear in about 8 months or so," she answered, and Haruki whined in disappointment. Kushina laughed again. "You'll just have to be patient, honey. It takes a while for a baby to be delivered. But, enough about that. You know what time it is. It's time for mommy and daddy to take you outside to train," Kushina said, bracing herself for the oncoming yay. "Yay? Training. True to Kushina's thoughts, the girl immediately brightened up at the prospect of training, immediately running over to the back door that led to the personal Namika's training grounds. Minato and Kushina laughed and kissed before following their daughter arm in arm outside. Before they exited, Minato turned around one last time to talk to Naruto. "Naruto always remembers that you have the same training options as Haruki does, and will gladly give you those. We can start right now if you want," Minato said, his voice significantly more subdued. But Naruto merely thrust his head into the couch and said nothing, wanting to appear as small as possible. Minato and Kushina frowned, and Kushina whispered something to her husband as they walked outside. Naruto heard his mother say one last thing before they fully disappeared. "Alright Naruto, make sure you run upstairs and do your homework. We'll be back inside before dinner. I'm making ramen tonight," she added as an afterthought. Naruto gagged a little. Naruto had dragged himself off to his room a little later, wanting to avoid the intense sounds of cheering that were coming from outside. He threw his backpack over to the side as soon as he entered his room and, to his great annoyance, he could see his sister and parents going over a whole bunch of taijutsu stances through the window. To his ire, she got them almost immediately, earning infernal applause from his parents. He slumped down on his bed. He didn't know why he was thinking that way about his sister. It wasn't her fault that he was afraid of being a ninja, but the whole thing was just plain infuriating to live through. He arose from his bed after a couple minutes, deciding to go into the house's study to avoid dwelling on this too much. He picked up his homework, some continuation of the basic weapon identification they had gone over this morning. He didn't quite understand it, and Naruto figured that there would be valuable information on it in this study. He grabbed his utensils and paper and headed out down the hallway, apologizing, as he accidentally bumped into one of the maids. The study was at the very end of the mansion, past his parents' bedroom. It was a comforting room, with its rustic wooden floors and walls. Numerous shelves held many books on almost every subject imaginable, a direct result of his father being the most powerful man in the village. He heard one last shriek from Haruki before he shut the door behind him and blocked out all noise. His brain was throbbing from all the stress, and he didn't want to have any more issues to deal with. "Easy Naruto. This is the study, it's quiet and away from any problems. I can take my time here and calm myself slowly. Just find a book on ninja weapons and I can get this over with already," he thought. He placed his materials down on his father's study desk and began browsing through the wide variety of books available on the shelves. He shuffled through a book on Kaiten before he finally found a book similar to what he was looking for. But the book next to it is what dragged his attention from it. It was a gold-bound tome, complete with ornate writing and design. It fell gravely out of place with the rest of the books in there, with their simple design and worn-out covering. But this one, it looked very old, but seemed to carry its age well. He traced his finger across the gold title along the spine of the book, feeling a sort of connection with the words. "The 9 bijuu," he sounded out the title, and it felt smooth and right coming out of his mouth. He looked around to see whether anyone was watching, before greedily snatching the book from his case and hurrying back to the desk. He slammed the book down on the wood, and it practically seemed to open by itself. It landed directly on the introduction, and despite his eagerness to read it, Naruto hesitated. He didn't know why, but this book gave off a bad vibe. Like the information held within this time was something he didn't want to know. Nevertheless, curiosity stained Naruto's conscience long enough, and, as soon as he read the first word, the small boy couldn't stop. He read through the words at a slow rate, morbidly fascinated by the beings described in these pages. And, as soon as he finished the introduction and flipped the page, he was greeted by a fairly lifelike drawing of a large, distended yellow tanuki, ugly, blue veins coursing through the creature's entire body. It was drawn standing in a forest, its white mouth opened in an expression of drunken glee. Several trees were being crushed underneath the creature's massive body weight. There was a caption with a title at the bottom of the page, one that read Ichibi. And so, Naruto read about the Ichibi, the Nibi, the Sanbi, the Yonbi, and he was halfway through reading about the Gobi, when his mother called him for dinner. After a long, unpleasant dinner, Naruto was back in his room, reading the precious material that seemed to captivate him. He read through the rest of the Gobi section, then about the Rakubi, Nanabi, and Hachibi. But, as he came across the picture of the last bijuu, the great fox Kyuubi, he froze. He dropped the book on the floor, its page being strewn in the wind. He clutched his head in agony, whimpering slightly, as all the repressed memories came swarming back to him. There was barely anything that Naruto had remembered at that fateful night, yet he remained traumatized over the years. All he remembered was an orange-masked man, and 9 long swishing tendrils. But now that terrible picture of the evil 9-tailed fox made him remember more. More specifically, the fox itself. He remembered it, in all its fearsome glory, outside the village of his home. Its devastating attacks ripped through everything in sight. He remembered hiding behind his mother, as his father rushed to engage the beast in mortal combat. He remembered the fear he had felt that time. All of it. Naruto gave a big lurch, and fell onto the ground with a loud thud, as all the horrible memories came back to him at once. He had landed next to the book, and Naruto's mind screamed at him not to read anymore. But despite all his reluctance, the boy couldn't keep away. He read through all of the Kyuubi section, becoming more and more horrified with every passing word. This was the beast that was considering a natural disaster, one that no mortal man could defeat. He turned the last page to the Kyuubi section, breathing heavily, but still noticing that there was more. The epilogue section covered some more minor details, and, as soon as Naruto closed the book, he felt sick to his stomach. He struggled to his feet, looking out the window, as he placed the book on his bed. There was a full moon out tonight, and the book mentioned something about the chibi being the most active during it. If there are things like that out there in the world, then I definitely don't want to become a ninja, Naruto whispered to himself. There was more to the book that had bothered him than the Kyuubi. The fact that the epilogue had mentioned that these beings were often sealed into humans that could use their power. These humans, who always became ninja, were called Jinchuriki. And the second thing, the epilogue had also made mention of bijuu, but beyond that single word, there had not been a shred of information about what that was. Naruto weakly picked up the golden book, deciding to bring it back to the study. It was late, and Naruto would dwell on what this meant for him in the morning. Apparently, the ninja world was a lot deeper than he gave it credit for. The thought was scary. Naruto crept out into the dark hallway, looking for any signs of a person. He sighed in relief. The servants, as well as Haruki, had already gone to bed, and the only light came from a cracked door near the end of the large house. That was his parents' room. He crept over the entrance of the study, which was in fact right next to his parents' room. He knew they could sense a chakra signature or something, but he prayed that they weren't able to now. He waited outside the door for a while, knowing that if he turned the knob to the study door, then he would be giving himself away to highly capable ninja like them. 15 minutes, and his parents still hadn't gone to bed. He rested his head in his lap, but shook awake when he heard his father mutter something. He strained his ears to hear, and was able to pick up on what his father was saying. But he wasn't sure he wanted to. Don't know what we're going to do with him. He doesn't even want to be a ninja, Naruto heard, and he already knew they were talking about him. I don't know if he's even capable of even becoming one. His chakra reserves are small, and the only thing that will make him a capable ninja is will, which is something that he clearly lacks. That was his mother talking. Let's just hope the new baby takes more after Haruki. As much as we love him, Naruto's attitude and appearance isn't very well liked outside the family. People seem to think he's disgraced the Namikaze family ever since it got out that he's afraid of being a ninja. He heard Kushina agree with him after that. Naruto almost stopped breathing after hearing that. He knew that his reputation around the village wasn't golden, but he didn't think that would rub off his family. So my family's being disgraced because of me. Naruto wasn't entirely shocked at this news. After all, that boy who had beat him today surely seemed to think that was the case. But for it to be extended throughout a large portion of the village, Naruto bit his lip. He didn't want his family to suffer because of his fear. That was low. He would definitely become a ninja, no matter how much he didn't want to. He did have the will to make it, so his family's name isn't tarnished. He wasn't weak anymore, and he wasn't about to let his traumatization take over his entire life. He would become a ninja. Though Naruto wouldn't know until later how hard it really was to suppress one's true feelings. I don't think it really matters that much. Haruki is going to be the heiress of both the Namikaze family and Uzumaki clan, no matter what. After all, she is a Jinchuriki, and she is taking after me and carrying the Kyuubi. Not to mention all that stuff you believe about the prophecy. Naruto slapped his hand over his mouth in order to prevent himself from gasping. Haruki was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. What's more, his mother was the previous Jinchuriki of it. What the hell? Minato seemed to agree with him, sealing the finality of the statement. His sister was the Jinchuriki of the Fox, and she was destined to become the heiress of the two clans. No matter what he did, that fact would never change. The lights finally turned off, signifying that his parents had gone to sleep. But Naruto stood there stock still, trying to digest the new information that had just been given to him. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.